everybody, and welcome to today's debate. The topic for today is Orientalism, and maybe you want to introduce the things that we're going to be discussing today?
Yeah, we are going to debate Edward Said's book Orientalism using some of Said's points and then comparing it to Varisco's critique of Said. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Then let's just get going. First of all, if we look at the cover of Said's book, like the front page, we have this painting by a French painter, Orientalist painter, Chiron. We're discussing why would he put this on the front page, and we assume that it's supposed to be like a classical example of Orientalist art, Orientalist painting. We have, like, as you can see, there is sort of the snake charmer himself. Like, this is the title of the painting. The snake charmer himself being sort of like naked, all sort of white compared to the other people who are like actually sitting there and looking at him. He's sort of like sexualized in a way. Then also the people who are sitting in the photo or in the painting, sorry, like looking at him, they have these sort of like expressionless faces. They're not like engaging as such with the painter, and there is sort of these war objects, you could call it, like weapons and so on in the painting as well. So the point is that this painting is sort of portraying stereotypes. It's showing like this eroticized, romanticized, and sort of like violent like concept of the Orient. And so that's why it's like, according to Said, this is obviously like a very good thing to put on the front cover of this book.
Yeah, a very clear image of an idea of what the Oriental is and not what it in fact is. And then you have Varisco using another front page, doing a critique on Said. In many ways, the pictures is a little bit the same. It's still snake charmer, but this picture is different in the way that the people in the picture, they're looking at the painter, so instead of being objects, they're in some way becoming subjects as well. And it's not as erotic, for instance, as Said's painting. And what Varisco then points out is that that Said's painting, that the painting he chose, is not representative for all of Orientalists. So Orientalism is not the same for everyone. And if you look especially on the painter that Varisco chose, Diné, then he points out that he moved to the Orient, he learned Arabic, he also converted to Islam, and in that way was engaging in what he was portraying. So in many ways that's opposing, that's a different way than Said is portraying all the Orientalism and all the Orientalist paintings.
Yeah. So so the point is sort of this critique of like the painting that Said chose is not necessarily representative of like all Orientalist painters. But then there's also the critique of Diné, who is like the painter of the painting on Varisco's cover, that even though, like, as you just mentioned, like, he converted to Islam, he moved to Algeria, he knew the language as well. Like, he also painted a lot of paintings of like half-naked Algerian women and so on. So maybe the painting of his that was chosen for Varisco's front page is not necessarily representative of what who he was as a painter as well.
Yeah. Or it's at least still expressing the same argument that Said is trying to do with the other painting, that it's still this image, a specific image, romanticized, a little bit dangerous image of the Orient, even though it's also a valid critique that Rebekka makes, that maybe also look at the reasons or in the engagement in the Orient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like this really relates to another critique made by Said of like Orientalism in general, that it creates or that it reproduces this like binary dichotomy between like an East and a West, or an Orient and an Occident, and that these or this dichotomy is sort of dominated by power relations, and or like Western power relations, obviously, and like colonialism, imperialism, and so on, and that we in the West or in the Occident have the power to define like the Orient and what it is and who it is, and so on. So yeah.
But that's also quite interesting when looking at Varisco, because what he's saying is that Said is doing the exact same thing as he's critiquing. He's just doing it reversing. So instead of where he says that what Said calls the Occident is making a stereotype of the Orient, then Said is making a stereotype of the Occident, saying that everyone thinks the same of the Orient, and this is specifically academia is attacking, that they all think in the same way. They all paint these pictures the same way, with the same idea, with the same goal, and not trying to engage in that maybe it has more nuances. And yeah, and especially also that's interesting because Said is not interested in, it doesn't seem like he's interested in having a debate about his critique on this subject.
I think even that, like now you're saying that he's sort of making this Occidentalism like in his own work, the way he's doing it. I even think Varesco makes a critique, which is that he's also like not only Occidentalist but also Orientalist, as he sort of when he speaks about Islam in his book, he's speaking about it as sort of an essence. So he's not like relating to it as some like a religion that people actually like practice and live and so on, but he's like essentializing it, which is a part of like what Orientalists would do and what he's actually like aiming to critique himself.
Yeah, and he's not. I don't remember if we mentioned this, but Said is in some way reproducing the image of the Orient himself, because he's not showing any alternative. He's just critiquing this specific picture, but he could have chosen, if he thinks that there is a right way of portraying the Orientalism, that he knows another way that's more real, then he could have chosen that picture. And in that way, he just confirms the stereotypes, and even then to that adds the stereotypes of the Occident.
Yeah, that's really good, like a point about it. And like it makes me think of his own sort of viewpoint from making the critique of Orientalism. So he like obviously, I think, I don't know if you mentioned it now, like he's Palestinian, growing up like half in Palestine, half in Egypt, then pursuing his academic career, studying in the US and so on. But he's been studying English literature. So he's in a completely different like academic field than like the academic field that he calls like Orientalism, sorry. And he sort of like in his book he says like the reason he can criticize these tendencies within like Orientalism is because he's an outsider. He's from another academic field. He's able to sort of observe and see what has been done so far with fresh eyes, and that is like why he's sort of entitled to make this critique of like the academic field that he calls Orientalism. Yeah.
And that's when Varisco makes a quite interesting point about this picture of himself as an amateur, because it's saying, so this is what some of the critics are saying that are using against Said, that he's an amateur, that his analysis is not based on facts, for instance, but then when Said is using it, So, so when Saeed is using the exact same picture, just in another way, he is saying, so I can see it from outside because I'm an amateur. But then Mariska points out, okay, but then where's the limits? If you don't have to be a scholar in that specific field to make valued points, then when are you? Because then it gets very blurry. Who is then entitled to make a critique? And I think that's very interesting that he's using this to legitimize his own critique. Also because that makes it possible for him to not comment on critique on him, because it's just easy to say, but I'm an outsider. I couldn't, for instance, know this, or that's not my point. I'm just because I'm an amateur.
Yeah. So you sort of, by saying that, you sort of avoid any critique of the critique he is making of Orientalism in general. Yeah.
And also you legitimize that maybe you don't have that many examples, or you're not that, because another critique of it is that it's not very structured. And in that way, because he's an amateur and he uses the picture of himself as an amateur, then it's okay.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not. And that's an interesting point. Where's the limits in this?
Definitely. It's just like drawing a parallel to another discussion we had recently, is this debate about Islamology. So, like, who is entitled to study Islam and to make contributions to this field of study? Is it like Muslims, or can non-Muslims be a part of this field as well? And like, who will make like the better contributions, or like what can each like different groups sort of contribute with to this study? So it's whole this like debate on knowledge and who can contribute and critique, and who is like who has the power over knowledge of a certain field somehow.
Yeah, both the power, but also just the fact of where you're from. Like we're obviously not from the Middle East, and are we entitled to discuss it? Can we discuss it in a good manner, or can we analyze and get to points that are actually valuable, or are we just reproducing an power image that we want to?
Can we not be Orientalists?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
Or good. I think that's a good point to end the discussion with, or to debate with. So thank you for watching.